Hello YouTube, coming to you again here, or have another decent day here in Illinois. So I'm going to go over some more things about my 87 Mustang GT. It's nice when you got little light focusing on the paint, because my other video was a little dark because it was dark out. And so I wanted to show you a little bit more on the car here. My last video I focused on the exterior of the car, what was done to it, what kind of paint was used, and some overall impressions of doing a restoration. So this video we're going to focus on the engine transmission setup on this car and my little review of just some of the things that some of the experience I had with it so far. So here we go. Here's my engine bay. Excuse the dirtiness of the car. It's just been sitting here in my garage for a little bit here, so it's getting dust on it. But so here's the engine, and I'll go over as much as I can about what's done to this. There's pretty much nothing in here that's original from the car when it was stock. Of course, this has had a couple owners, so of course they've replaced parts along the way as well. So I'll do my best to go over everything. So let's start with the top here. The engine itself is a regular 302 block that was bored out 40 over. Originally it was a 30 over car, but then after some further inspection, the cylinder walls had some scuffing, so we went ahead and bored it 40 over, and this has got a DSS 331 bottom end kit in it. So it's pretty cool. You definitely notice the torque increase. Power wise, it doesn't feel much different. Of course, I haven't really repped this thing out yet, but it's got a DSS 331 kit in it with 40 over pistons, so in reality this thing's probably like a 334, 335, but it's a 331 nonetheless. I had a engine builder who's really reputable and well known here in Illinois do the bottom end work and the assembly and everything. It's tight, it's good, it was really well done. And so moving up a little bit, you can see here that I have ceramic coated headers. They're BBKs, shorty headers. The reason I went with shorty is because everything's just easier when you have shorty or stock length headers to get to everything when you're installing your starter and all the wires that run to it. It's just a lot easier to work around it. And horsepower wise, you can see the numbers on forums and even on YouTube videos where your gains really aren't that much unless you go to like a really high compression, really big block motor, or even a really a big output small block like a 427. So really there was no real improvement gains, and it would be kind of a pain in the butt to do any installation under the car with long tubes. So I went with shorties. Now ceramic coated headers do cost more than your standard stainless or chrome headers, and they just look, you know, kind of bland, but at the same time, I really like ceramic because they really insulate heat really well. They're not like burning up your clutch cables. They're not really, putting any kind of heat on anything around them. Of course, they still put out a lot of heat, but they're not as potent, I would say, as, say, like a chrome or a stainless header. So the nice thing about ceramic coated headers is the heat output around them. It's really nice. I would recommend spending the extra money to get ceramic coated headers. They don't look that bad under the hood, and they do help save like your clutch cable, because as you can see, your clutch cable is not that far from it. And a lot of people, if they do have a lot of heat issues, they put some either thermal wrapping around it so it helps insulate it. But this, I have had no clutch cable issues with these headers. Moving up further, I got some polished valve covers. Those valve covers came from, I think, late model restoration. They did not have the black inserts in them. They were just a regular polish, but over time they got corroded and they look nasty. So my buddy who does the body work on this car polished these up for me and then painted the inserts black. Nice little touch. Under the valve cover, we have some Edelbrock RPM2 aluminum cylinder heads with the 202 and 16 valves. Really nice, really good for this setup. The camshaft is a Comp Cams 274 I don't remember the rest of the specs, but it's a 274. It's a really mild cam. The car does have some lump on the idle, but it's not ridiculous. It doesn't surge. The only time it really surges is when it's at startup when it's cold. It'll surge for about 10 seconds, and then the idle will find itself. So it really works well with this setup. You can really drive it normally. When you come to a stop, the car will kind of want to surge a little bit, but once you give it a little gas, then it holds that RPM until you come to a stop, and then it'll just go back down to where it's supposed to be. Right now, the idle speed is probably around 750 to 800, close to stock. I believe stock was around 550, but it idles good. It runs good. The cam, a good mid-range cam. You can definitely feel that bottom end torque when you're giving it some throttle. It feels good. I'm happy with it. Originally, this car had a Lunati cam in it. I don't remember the specs, but it had a little bit more of a aggressive idle and really good top end cam. This thing would want to just keep going past, the 6,000 RPM red line or 6,250. And but the idle, it would surge at idle just at a stop sign and or a stoplight, and you'd have to constantly rev it to keep it running. Otherwise, it would just surge out and die on you. Moving up to that, we have a Edelbrock RPM2 intake manifold. These are expensive intake manifolds, and I got lucky. I ended up buying a 92 Mustang that had this already on it, but it was just a regular 302. It still had iron heads, but it had this large intake on it. So I originally had a 93 Cobra intake, an authentic one on it. So I decided to swap the intakes because this thing is meant for these cylinder heads. So matching parts along with that, you have your bigger throttle body, of course. I believe this is a 70 millimeter. Let's see, we can take a look at it here. Yes, it's a 70 millimeter spacer and throttle body. Of course, anytime you go bigger on your intakes and stuff like that, you're only going to choke it down if you don't upgrade your throttle body. So, along with that, I have an Anderson power pipe. This is just your standard 3.5-inch power pipe. It's not the large 4-inch one. This one fits just fine. I had to end up cutting because, as you can see, it's already close to the strut tower here. And this probably had another inch of metal going out towards the inside of the engine bay. So I ended up cutting about an inch off and about an inch off the coupler there to make it fit. So just a little bit of fab work there, nothing big. Looks nice. I believe it's a coated unit. I don't think it's polished aluminum, but it's a coated unit. It's got a Pro-Am mass air meter, an 80 millimeter mass air meter in the fender well. Of course, you can't see it because everything is, coated up. You probably can't see the filter too well in there, but it's got a mass air Pro-Am mass air meter with the filter attached, matched for my 24-pound fuel injectors. The ignition system is very close to stock. It's your standard Ford distributor. The TFI has been replaced. A TFI module has been replaced with some aftermarket. I'm actually surprised it still hasn't gone out because those generally fail unless they're a Motorcraft or a stock Ford unit. It's got Ford racing wires and then some NKG spark plugs. Fuel pressure is set in the 30s. I don't remember where. We tried to set it at the 40 mark, but actually it was running too rich and the car would not want to run, so we just dialed down the fuel pressure and it runs great. The coil is a stock coil. Originally I had an MSD coil on it. And the funny thing is, I don't know why, but the Ford ones seem to be better than the aftermarket. Now, I don't know about the Demon coils or anything like that, but MSD, we tested it. The output on an MSD unit was less than the stock Ford unit, which is kind of surprising. But at the same time, it works great, so why replace it? So this is just a standard Motorcraft Ford coil. So yeah, nothing special there. Moving on to the cooling system of this car, you probably noticed that it's got an electric fan set up. This is actually off an Escape, a Ford Escape. It's a dual fan setup. You can see we've got my relay attached to the shroud. So one of the fans runs based off the temperature, and then the other fan is run to a switch. So if the car starts getting really hot, you can throw on the other switch, and both fans will be running. And also, it's a good fail-safe in case one fan decides to go, because this is used. If it decides to go and you notice your car's overheating, the fan's not kicking on, you can flip the switch and you got a fan running until you can get it fixed. My radiator is a large dual-core radiator from Late Model Restorations, their SVE series radiator for a manual transmission. I did have one issue with this radiator when I installed it. You can see the hose here for the overflow. It's got a brass barb fitting in there now. Now, when I was test fitting this radiator and I plugged this hose into the aluminum barb, and after I was satisfied with the fitment, I went to pull it off, and I wasn't like moving it back and forth. I was just pulling it straight down. It actually broke the aluminum barb all the way out from the radiator. So we just tapped it and put a barb fitting in there that's brass, and it's solid. It's not going anywhere. This thing holds a lot of coolant, and I have no dissatisfaction with the amount of cooling this car has. It's great. It's just stock hoses for the input and output from the radiator. The water pump is just a brand new water pump unit from a parts store from O'Reilly's. Nothing special there. Stock power steering unit with the Ford Racing bracket to move it up to this position. Normally a stock one that had air conditioning originally will be mounted down further. And you'll see a lot of people that don't buy the bracket. It still has the air conditioning bracket with the two prongs that come out with the holes for them for the bolts. This one already had this bracket set up, and I was very happy with it. It's very clean looking. It's got a March alternator pulley bracket kit. You can see it's got the March bracket there at the bottom. Uses Allen wrenches. That's kind of a pain in the butt because a lot of people don't have the standard Allen wrench that size to get these off or to tighten them on. But it's very clean. It removes the bracket for the smog pump pulley and everything. It's a very clean looking system, and it's got the adjustable arm here for your length of belt and the way you route it. So that's pretty nice. That all came on the car, so I didn't have to purchase any of this stuff. It was already there. So nice little luxury when you buy a used Fox body. A lot of times people already do a lot of the upgrades to them, and it's just your job to either clean them up or add a few more to complete it. There is one big eyesore that he probably didn't notice on my wire tuck tip video, but it's my wiper motor. As you can see, it's nasty. My original one did have a nice polished aluminum cover, but it had sticky back glue on it, so I could not take it off without destroying it. And of course I had to replace my wiper motor because it went dead. And unfortunately there's not a real easy way to fix them, at least not that I know of. Like with starters, you can replace the coils on the starters and brushes and stuff like that in your alternators, but with the wiper motor there really isn't a good way to fix them. So I happened to come across one off another car that was going to be junked. It worked fine, so I just got to take this unit back off and clean it. I haven't taken it off yet because I left it on there just to test that it worked, the wipers. Because again, it's a used part, so you want to make sure it works before you start putting any effort into painting it. And sure enough, it works. It works great on all the speeds. So I just got to take it back off at some point and paint it. All right, so clutch cable is a Steeda cable, I believe, with the firewall adjuster. Very nice when your clutch is starting to feel tight and you need to loosen it up a little bit or tighten it a little bit if it's grinding into gears. Real convenient to have one of those. The clutch is a center force dual friction clutch. It's a pretty nice clutch. It was already in the car and it was almost brand new when I bought the car. So after inspecting it, it looked good. Just threw it back on there. Of course, with going to a 331 setup, you do have to change out your balancer and flywheel because the stock ones are 50 ounces. You have to go to a 28 ounce or a zero balance, so that way your rotating assembly can be balanced out zero. So it's a 28 balance on the harmonic balancer, and then a 28 ounce on the flywheel. My transmission is a Tremec T3550, and I got this for a good price too because my buddy has a race car. It only has maybe 50 miles on the transmission, but he has a supercharged 351 car, and he road races it, and he needed something that could handle the torque that he was throwing at it. So this one had no issues, and he needed to get rid of it quick, so I bought it off of him. And when you do a TR3550 transmission swap into a Fox, you do have to change the bell housing. The bell housing matches up to one that you can get from like an 82 Mustang, or you can buy a Ford Racing one that's meant for a Tremec transmission. So all those parts are available. You can find them. They're not that hard to find, and you can find a used like bell housing off, like I said, an 82 Mustang, and it fits up as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the engine. I hope I covered everything enough in detail. If you guys have any questions about the engine or transmission setup, of course, just let me know. Oh yeah, one thing else to mention is the transmission. It is a 10-spline transmission with a 10-spline input shaft, 10-spline clutch, everything like that. I wasn't worried about going to a 26-spline. I don't think I'm going to break it. If I do, then of course that'd be the time to upgrade. But if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they are expensive to go to a 26-spline on your input shaft and clutch. 26-spline clutches are pretty expensive for a decent clutch. So the next thing I kind of want to cover, I know this is mostly going over the engine and transmission setup, but I wanted to cover my suspension a little bit because this is kind of a review of some of my suspension components. And you know what, I'm going to probably wait for another video to cover suspension, but there's some things to cover on this, probably stuff that maybe other people are seeing as well. So this one, it was mostly just here to cover the engine transmission setup. The shifter on the transmission, I'm sorry, I forgot, is a Steeda Triax built for the TR3550. Anyone knows that has a Tremec transmission that's a T500, T600, or the TR3550. The shifters are built specifically for their design. You cannot swap a T5 or a T45 shifter onto those type of transmissions. They have a different kind of mounting system on their base plates, so you have to get one specific for it. Alright folks, so I hope you enjoy going over the setup for my engine here and the transmission. The next video we'll be going over my suspension, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching. Any comments, definitely leave one in the comments section. I have no problem with the private messages either. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going. This is my setup of my 87 Mustang. Thanks for watching.